questions I'd like to ask Amir. So, Claire, Bill, Trevor, Gareth, Russell. Okay, we'll do it in that order if that's okay. So, Claire, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, okay. Well, like I said to you, I just wanted to say it was just incredibly powerful.
Thank you.
And I just really valued your just clarity and truthfulness and your clear passion.
That's very kind. Thank you.
And I think what I wanted to sort of come back to is there was 2 points really where you were saying we never name what it is. We always go, well, there's colonialism, there's this, and we never come back to if this is Islam as an ideology. And my thoughts were like you were talking about what's the solution, and you didn't feel that there was a solution, but let's imagine there was. What do you think may happen? The sort of consequences of society actually going, no, hang on a minute, this is Islam. What, because I am conscious that everything, that unfortunately there is, whether it may be far smaller than I think it is, but there is an element of the far right that will just use any opportunity. And I think, yes, that's a concern, but also like, if we actually start being honest and naming it, how do you think that would kind of start to play out? I mean, I'd like to hope it's positive.
Yeah, what a great question. That's a fantastic question. I will have to speculate a lot here because obviously I don't know the answer. Let's play it out. We start naming the problem. First of all, how can you treat any disease if you don't diagnose it? That's the first step. And if we admit that the disease here is Islam, will it empower some far-right elements? Well, I don't believe there is much far-right in Britain. That's why people like Douglas Murray and Sam Harris in the US, they are branded as far-right because there's so much lack of actual far-right that we need to call others far-right. I've been called far-right. Yeah, and there's a supply and demand problem for those people. So I'm not worried about that. What will happen, though, because we are talking about people who aren't necessarily the most rational people when it comes to being criticized or having their ideas criticized, is that there will be riots in the streets, and there will be. Let's use one example. In Denmark, Jyllands-Posten, which is one of the biggest daily newspapers, published cartoons again of Prophet Muhammad. As a result, there were riots all over the world. Over 200 people were killed. Embassies burnt down, and that's just for cartoons being published. So what would happen if we actually went out openly and started saying, Islam is a problem. Muhammad was not a role model to aspire to. I think the sensitivities of a large portion of the Muslim population, if not all, will be so triggered that we would have such riots on our hand. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think it might need it to wake up. That might be the only way to a solution. So I've just been thinking out loud because it was such a good question to kick us off with, Claire, that I am actually just hearing my own thoughts for the first time as I speak them. I hope that answers the question somewhat. Sam Harris, I asked Sam Harris a similar question once, sorry. I asked him, because he's sort of fallen into this nonsense of Islam versus Islamism. And I asked him, why do you do it? Why don't you just name the problem? And he said, well, look what happened to Christianity in the West when we were burning witches and killing people for apostasy and such. It was by sort of identifying those elements and ridiculing them separately from sort of the doctrine of Christianity that we manage to overcome those. And I don't necessarily believe that, but I think when someone brings up Deuteronomy or Leviticus in the Bible and says, well, what about all those verses, etc., they're playing a game that we shouldn't fall into. We should really say, what does Islam teach, and do we think that teaching is compatible with our values? If not, it has nothing to do here. And then come what may. All right, I'll stop there, sorry.
Trevor,
Oh, right. It's not so much a question.
Mhm.
But you can treat it as a question.
I'll do my best, Trevor.
Right. Well, I thought it was a very good talk in terms of you describing the effects of this problem. You describe it descriptively, right, over generations and a long time, since going back to the Satanic verse,
Mhm.
etc. Right? So that's good. That was excellent. I don't like, I must say, I don't like when somebody says there is no solution and we're too late and it's all done. I never like that. It doesn't matter when Carl Benjamin in this very room said it, I didn't like it. Right? When other people go around and say, oh, well, we're doomed. I don't want to, I'm like that. You should cut that out of your speech. I'll tell you exactly what the problem is.
I know what the problem is. What's the solution?
No. You don't know what the problem is.
Okay.
The problem is Islam as such. Right? Islam can be dealt with in 10 seconds. 10 seconds in this country, 6% of the population. Can be dealt with in 10 seconds. The problem is white people. That's the problem.
and it's your fault.
Yes, I'm sorry, it's your fault. There's white people. I mean, there's some people still talking about, even though you went through all these things about Islamophobic and being called far right, there's people still afraid of it. People are afraid of it. I'm not afraid of it. I don't care about, the truth is the truth. What white people are afraid, it must be hard being a white person. It's got to be really hard. Because you've got 50%, the problem with this country is that 50% of the white people vote Labour, Liberal Democrat, Green, right, blah, 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 etc., etc. They're in the institutions, and these are what is it Gadsad called?
Suicidal empathy.
That's right, yeah. That's the problem. That's the people who's holding the door open and letting them in.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's the people who's apologising for everything. That's the people who says that the thing that you described, the Manchester Arena bombing. That's, I don't want to be racist. That's the thing that with the grooming gang, so grooming gangs, right? This is, we don't want to be sort of as racist. That's white people, right? And I don't give, it's not Jamaican people, it's not Indian people, it's white people. Right? So this is the battle for this country, to save this country from Islam, which is a political ideology and not a religion. Not just a religion, it's a political ideology. Like Adolf Hitler had a political ideology. Right? Islam is that plus God said. God said it. Right? And that's irrespective of all the millions of people who are Muslim, not through their own choice, they're just hoisted into it. And I know more about Islam than they do, than most of them. True, that's true. I know that as a fact, right? So to cut to the chase, I just think that it's white people.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a battle, right, for the future of the country. And you can't say the 6% is the poison, right? 50% or more are holding the door for the poison. That's the case, and we've got to understand that, right? And I think that we've got to understand what Islam is: a political ideology of conquest, right? That's what it is. No, you're not going to change it. No ifs, no buts. You've got to deal with it. You've got to tackle it. You've got to know how it's infiltrating and how it's metastasizing within the country. You've got to understand the principles of it. And most people don't. They just don't. There's so much ignorance, it's untrue. People don't know anything about it. You read the Quran, haven't you? No doubt, right. And me too. You've got to have, if you've not read the Quran, then you don't know what you're talking about, largely. And the Quran's the best bit. That's the easy bit. Right? Then you get to the Hadith and another part. That's another level. That's another
Amir, do you
level.
want to come back to
Yeah, I'm just waiting for
Go on.
Trevor to finish.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
We all brevity challenged.
Yeah. No, I think Trevor, if we go back to my talk, I appreciate that this may be a failure on my part, but what I highlighted is with my question is, aren't you tired? And the aren't you tired is about this cycle that we in the West, if you want to say white people, some people say others, but we in the West have gone into this playbook that happens every time there is a terrorist attack, every time there's a beheading, every time there's a gang rape of a non-Muslim girl by a group of Muslim men, is that we go into this charade, this pantomime of saying this has nothing to do with Islam, and it's not Muslims necessarily saying it. It's what was Barack Obama's sort of sentence after one of these terrorist attacks. He said this beautiful sentence. It's like, this has less to do with Islam than any other religion. So apparently the Mormons are more responsible for ISIS than Islam is.
No, but he was a Muslim.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah, he was.
No, he's not.
Hussein, Barack Hussein.
Well,
It was George. I remember this so clearly after 9/11, which I was still
Bush,
living in
yeah.
the States. It was George W. Bush
Exactly.
who went after them and said, what did he say about Islam? It's the religion of peace.
yeah.
And you cannot say anything other than that. And that's a Republican, a Christian evangelical Republican, who branded it the religion of peace. And I remember it back then going, I don't think so.
No. I mean, it's
But he laid down the law, and he was not a lefty.
no.
So you
And Tony Blair did it in this country as well, and
In other words, white people.
no. But the thing is, it's not about being white that does it. It's about a societal element that we have just accepted, that we play this game. And I'm so sick and tired of it, and I'm sure you are too, that there is a terrorist attack, the murderer, the assailant shouts Allahu Akbar, says, I'm doing this. He's literally on camera saying, I'm doing this on behalf of Muhammad, on behalf of Islam. And then we, next day on TV, say, have these talking heads say, well, this has nothing to do with Islam. The assailant doesn't know what he's talking about. And
Then
such.
you've got to explain why that is. That's the point, really. That's
Well-
part of the matter. It's not the fact that he says Allahu Akbar, right? Because all Muslims, since Muhammad, have always said Allahu Akbar before they kill somebody or behead somebody, right? They all do. That's the nature of the beast. You've got to explain why these people are apologizing for it and how that can be defeated.
Well, I'll leave it to the audience if I had answered that question already by saying that we're afraid of being called bigots, and that's the worst thing that can possibly be considered. That's
And I'm going to say, Bill, your
Yeah.
next question.
Bill.
Well, first thing to say is, firstly, thank you for a very interesting and extremely worthwhile talk, and for your courage in doing so. You know, I appreciate that this is not entirely risk-free for you, I'm sure. Let's try and be a starry-eyed optimist for a moment, and think about, can anything be done with the perhaps small percentage of British Muslims who don't condone acts of violence? Now, we can say for certain, it's clearly their religion, Islam is clearly inspiring them, and as you said, attempts to avoid that are just kind of silly.
Mm-hmm.
Is there there any hope one can reach them? I'm sort of thinking, obviously it's a very long time ago, but after it was King John, if I remember rightly, threw the Jews out of Britain, and they were exiled for several hundred years till all the Commonwealth left back in again, that they found sanctuary in more respect. Now, it wasn't perfect,
No.
so there were pogroms, but by and large, there was a degree of coexistence. But that was perhaps a relatively enlightened form of Islam. Is there any hope for a relatively enlightened form of Islam amongst, say, 4 or 5, I don't know, 10%, whatever percentage of the Muslim population, that potentially could counterbalance, to an extent, the prevailing fanaticism? Or is that just absolutely hopeless?
The way I look at it is that Islam is so, as a doctrine, inherently immune to any form of revision or updating, that is not necessarily, and it's also, as I mentioned, total. It's totalitarian, but also very total, in the sense that anyone who actually pursues, let's call it, actual Islam or real Islam, will always end up with having to make those choices of, should I be a real Muslim, or should I be a Majid Nawaz figure who pretends or claims to be Muslim for his own monetary or political gains, but fact of the matter is just a grifter. Well, my mother is a Muslim. She doesn't condone any violence or believes that anyone should be beheaded or such. So how can I sit here and say that what you, Bill, are offering is not possible? It's because there will always be that element. So let's use an analogy. Imagine that the entire world wakes up tomorrow without zero knowledge of anything that has happened in the world prior to the moment they wake up. They're completely blank slates. We don't even have language. Eventually, we will find out that the earth is round, that it travels around the sun, etc. These things will be found. The same thing, the same sort of, let's call it principle, not principle, but the same playbook will happen with true Muslim. They may sort of start off with a notion of a benign form of Islam, an updated version of Islam. But if they eventually go to the sources and teach the sources, and they are committed to being a true Muslim, they will always have to revert, or they have to be inconsistent. Because Islam itself, the books, the teachings, they cannot be updated or amended or changed or edited. So that's the issue I have. And then the question just becomes a statistical question. Well, let's say we bring in 1 million Muslims. What percentage of that is going to go to those lengths and extremes? Is it 1%? Is it 10%? Is it 15%? All of those questions are important to know in advance, and we can't. So, and finally, thank you for your kind words. I always refuse to accept that compliment of being courageous, because I am ridiculously lucky to live in the West, where I have, and I maintain the right, and I insist on the right of being able to speak out. And I don't think it takes courage to do that. The courageous people are the people of Iran or even Afghanistan who do speak up under massive threats. So I'm very grateful for the kind words, but I cannot accept it. So thank you, though. Russell, I believe it was next. Yeah. Hi, Russell.
It was an excellent talk, but I have more hope than other people, probably than you, because I think it needs to start with education. I think the problem goes back to the 60s and 70s, when a lot of the institutions were racist. We have to accept that to start. But the remedy to that was wrong, because what we should have done, and it's called the lock-in social contract. The lock-in social contract says that justice should be independent and equal for everyone, irrespective of what their race is, what their gender is, what their religion is. But instead of implementing it properly, they ditched that in favour of what's called critical race theory. So therefore, we know what the problem was. The solution is to ditch critical race theory and go back to implementing the Lockean social contract properly. Now that's the first thing, and then that should be taught in schools and institutions, so people get into the right mode of thinking. Now the other part of critical thinking comes in useful is in the Quran itself. Now the Quran has a concept of abrogation. Now the reason they claim there was abrogation was due to change of society. That was in 23 years, but in 1,400 years later, abrogation is not allowed. And so that is a very good dilemma to show that it cannot have a divine origin. Because then something as simple as that dilemma shows that Sharia law is not divine. And also there's the other problem, that's called the clarity dilemma. The Quran claims clarity, yet people have been disputing that for over 1,400 years, interpretation. I used to write SOP, Standard Operating Procedures, and I say if the SOP had the same clarity as the Quran, it would be instantly dismissed as unfit for purpose.
Yeah, that's a great point. If we talk purely theologically, Islam is the easiest of all religions or philosophies to debunk. It's just contradictions after contradictions, nonsense after nonsense. It's so laughable that no reasonable person should be able to even take it seriously, but unfortunately 2 billion do. The abrogation part is interesting because abrogation in the Quran, for those who may not be too familiar, is the Quran can be split into two parts. We have the Mecca verses and the Medina verses. So the Mecca verses are very benign. They're very much Muhammad preaching similar to what Jesus preached, etc., etc. And at the time, Muhammad was didn't have many followers. He was very weak. He didn't have much finances and such to be able to pose any threats to anyone. So his preachings were very peaceful. But then, once he did travel to Medina and acquired an army for himself and such, suddenly you see this shift of, you remember everything I said in those verses? Forget about them. We're all about killing and murdering and slaughtering people, etc., etc. And that's when he managed to get an army to be able to be in a position where he can actually live out his psychopathic fantasies. So there's not been much abrogation after Muhammad's death within Islam. There's been sort of camps of those who say, okay, who's the true successor of Islam? Is it his cousin Ali, that constitutes the Shia sect, or is it Abu Bakr that constitutes the Sunni sect, etc.? But in terms of the actual doctrines of Islam, there's been very little edited sense. Yes.
Just a really quick question, just to clarify. So in the Quran,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like the Mecca, where it's all nice and peace and love,
Mm-hmm.
is before the Medina, which is
Exactly.
like, let's go and kill everybody.
Exactly.
So almost like the opposite of the Bible.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Old Testament is let's stone everybody,
Yeah.
and then the New Testament is actually let's be nice to everyone. So it's
Very
the
much.
opposite way round.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never even looked at it that way. But I mean, I'm very fortunate that I have a brother who is a very renowned Christian theologian, and he very clearly explains, and this is something that Christians and Jews have known for centuries, if not millennia, that even if you look at the Deuteronomy of this world or the Leviticuses of this world, they were never meant, those, for example, kill all the Canaanites, etc., etc. They were never meant to be an order that all Jews should live by for all eternity. Those were temporal. They were for a particular moment in time and for a particular situation. They were never meant to be. Certain rulings were, like if a woman is not a virgin on a wedding night, she should be stoned outside of her father's house, or whatever the verse is. Those were primarily, those can be argued that they were meant to be a teaching forever. But most of the texts that we today find abhorrent in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, they were very much temporal. in nature, theologically speaking.
Abrogated.
Yeah, abrogated, very much so, yeah.
Gareth?
Yeah.
Gareth?
Yeah, thanks. As much as I want to, admire Trevor's Churchill kind of fighting on the beaches, I'm afraid I think we're still in the Chamberlain years. And therefore, unless we did get that Churchill moment where the reality is in our face, and sadly I'm thinking it'll probably be too late by that stage, when it will become clear to everybody to fight them on the beaches. I'm with Trevor on this. I think we do need that Churchill moment, but we are definitely in the Chamberlain years of appeasement, and I think
They're only 6%.
and I think one of the things that is going to drive that appeasement is that we have lost our own ideology. We don't even know what we believe, and I think as a country, what we believe is somewhere on a spectrum between the Enlightenment, atheism, and Christianity. So we are a Christian country, but we're also an Enlightenment country, and those two are kind of pulling along a spectrum. And then you bring Islam into that, and it's like it's dividing and conquering between the Enlightenment and the Christian aspects of our society. But going back to my point, I think we are going to appease, and we are going to just one of the things that's very evident right now is this two-tier society. This is laying the grounds for the dhimmi status. So if you've heard of the word dhimmi, the dhimmi are the second-class citizens in the Islamic world who are not pure Muslims. They are people of the book, and therefore there's certain special rules for these Christians and Jews who, if you're not a Christian or Jew, you have every right to be slaughtered. Then it's the people, but the dhimmi who have the second-class status, and we as a society will basically accept this dhimmi status because it will be in our interests. We will have the nice cars and nice houses, and life will carry on if we agree to be dhimmi. It's when we stand up and fight and says, I refuse to be a second-class citizen in my own country, that's when we're going to face the persecution. And so I turn this into a question, is should we be fighters or dhimmi?
Yeah, no, it's to be honest, it's a good question, because my counterback to that, Gareth, is that how the hell are we already not there? 250,000 of our girls have been raped, and that's not enough for us to stand up and say, what the fuck?
Yeah.
If that's not enough, nothing is. Nothing is. I think, the name of this talk that I suggested to Jude was Acquiescence and Appeasement of the West. And I don't see that point of now it's gone too far. After 250,000 girls have been raped, I don't think there's anything else that we can possibly say can happen. That's the greatest crime in the history of this country. There is none that comes close to it.
If that's the case, I think we need to be telling people we are now dhimmi.
Well, I think we are.
And people suddenly go, what do you mean by dhimmi?
Yeah.
You are a dhimmi, you are a second-class citizen.
Well,
But
Well, what is a dhimmi?
a dhimmi is somebody who submits to Islam
Yeah.
and is humiliated
Yes.
and has to pay a different tax from the Muslims.
I put a badge
That's
on
a
my
dhimmi.
I put a badge on my shirt saying I am a second-class citizen.
Well,
Are you
that's
not-
you.
Are you
That
not
That's you.
humiliated?
Some fucking typical
Oh, no,
white
listen.
boy.
Listen, Trev, the words you've just used, humiliation. I feel humiliated that 250,000 girls have been raped in this country
Well, you
by
should do something
predominantly
about it.
Pakistani Muslim men.
Yeah, you should do
Yeah.
something about it.
We've been trying for years. I've been
Well,
talking about it for at least 30 years.
The man
But
asks,
you can't get anywhere.
you, are you tired?
Well,
Yeah, I've been
You should
fucking
say you're
tired of
tired,
it for years.
but you're not quitting.
No.
okay, so
I don't want to hear about
I'm just
quitting.
aware of time
No,
getting
no,
on.
but that's everything that you just
And
said.
there's still people want to ask questions still.
Mm.
No, sorry.
So shall I move to Charles? You went next.
Charles.
Yes, just on education, it relates to your point actually about Dimitude as well, of thinking about the Batley Grammar School RE teacher, who was, let's not forget, still in hiding 5 years after he taught a lesson
Mm.
to sixth form students. It was a lesson on the concept of blasphemy. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. He used a number of examples of what counts as blasphemy in different faiths, among them Islam, and he showed them one of the cartoons.
And he pre-warned them that anyone who
Yes.
doesn't want to see this is welcome to leave.
None of his students objected.
No.
Somebody went home and told their parents what had been done. Next morning, a mob outside the school, and the man is still in hiding with his entire family. He was an outstanding RE teacher. I think of him because I taught a similar lesson many years ago, again to sixth formers, and it was at the time of the Salman Rushdie episode with satanic verses. So I used the relevant extracts from the satanic verses, and we went into all the issues about freedom of speech, and the books were being, copies were being burned, and people were being murdered, and so on. And to be completely honest with you, I do reflect now when I look back, with having a mortgage at the time, young family, etc. I asked myself, in the light of the back of the grammar school, would I be that?
Yeah.
Would I be that live again?
Yeah.
My wife's here; she might have an opinion. But it does make me think, and that's the issue you're raising.
Yeah.
Quite right.
Yeah, we will get to keep our cars, we will get to keep our houses, our jobs, if.
But I make a plea as well, made before, to the centrality of religious education in the school curriculum, but taught in a way that is systematic, truthful, realistic, and analytical, which at the moment in very large parts of the education system is not the case, partly because of events like that. What I was going to ask you was about what. Really, my question is, I've read a couple of books by Ed Hussein. I listened to interviews with him. Part of me desperately wants to think that he might have a point. I just wonder why your interpretation of the Islamic sources is so radically different, as it appears to be, from his. Because he does believe that the true Islam is compatible with Western democracy. Ed Hussein is a professor at Georgetown University in America. He does believe that the true Islam is radically compatible with Western liberal democratic values. You obviously don't.
No.
And it's based on, I presume in his case, based on his reading of the sources. You've read the sources. Why are interpretations so radically different? And of course there are other Muslims like Professor Hussein who
929.
Who think the same way. And sort of following on from that, even if it's the case that Professor Hussein's interpretation is wrong or is unsustainable, I mean, I'm guessing the answer is no, but just in case, is there any realistic possibility of a reconstruction of Islam, something that could pass for Islam, that Muslims, or majority of Muslims, could live with? That would be compatible.
Very, very challenging questions. Before I sort of go into that, the second part of your comments, I'm very interested in this concept of religion, because in the West we pride ourselves of having this notion of freedom of religion, but that is a blanket statement that we invented. Well, I didn't really, but likes of John Stuart Mill and the founding fathers in the US, that they sort of treasured because they weren't familiar with Islam. Their idea of religion was this notion of a set of primarily spiritual beliefs in a God, and as such they felt that we should have the freedom of believing in it or not. But Islam just flies under the radar and hides under the blanket of a religion, even though if you break it down, it's not necessarily. I think something like around 30% of the Quran is spiritual and about the God. 70% is about the world here and now. Maybe I'm wrong on those numbers, don't quote me on it, but a lot of the Quran is about the here and now, how you're allowed to dress, what taxes you should pay, how you should be allowed to beat your woman, etc., etc. But let's just make something up. Well, we don't need to make it up, but let's imagine one of those religions from the ancient world where, let's say, that teaches that every 5th child should be killed. This is my religion. Do we need to say, well, we have freedom of religion, so they should be allowed to practice it? Of course not. It's absurd. Yet we do this ridiculous move for Islam just because it happens to be the world's 2nd largest religion. And I think that notion of freedom of religion should be challenged primarily from a liberal, and I mean liberal in the John Stuart Mill sense. Now, the second part about why is my reading different to Ed Husain's. Now, you will know the story of the conversation between George Orwell and Arthur Koestler, where Koestler, at the time being a strong believer in communism, was talking about how it's leading to, you know, the land of honey and milk and honey and such. And Orwell challenged Koestler and said to him, how can you say this when there are these gulags in Stalin's Soviet Union? And Koestler very casually responded, well, to make an omelette you need to break a few eggs. And to which Orwell responded, where is your omelette? And And that's my response to Mr. Ed Hussein, Professor Ed Hussein. Where is your omelette? Look at the Muslim world, 2 billion people, 55 countries. Where is your omelette? Where is this Islam that is so benign and compatible? Which is the democratic country that is primarily Islamic that you think the rest of the West can learn from? Where is this? How is it that the entire Muslim world is so adamantly misinterpreting what you have, for some reason, interpreted right after being exposed to democratic liberal ideas? Fact of the matter is, in a theological debate about Islam, Ed Hussein would be wiped. I'd wipe the floor with him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But the problem with someone like him, sorry, Trevor. The problem is that he's speaking to an audience who's primarily uneducated on Islam, and he can get away with that. Now, that I'm not trying to dismiss Professor Hussein, because I believe there is a good man there, and I wish that he was right. I wish that this was true. But fact of the matter is, wishful thinking is nonsense in this case, and it's actually harming us. Just look at what Islam produces. I mentioned this earlier, but I think it really bears repeating. In the Arab world, I think it's around 22 countries. In 10 years, less books are translated than in Italy's in 1 year. That says a lot about what Islam does to a society. And hand on heart, to admit something, my teleprompter broke down in the beginning of my talk, so I had to ad-lib a lot. But part of my talk was about how Islam has imprisoned not just us in the West, as we were talking about earlier, but the 2 billion people who are hostages to it. They are the ones with stage 4 cancer. It's them that we should also want to save from this wicked ideology. They don't produce anything in science. They don't produce anything in literature that is worthy today. There is nothing good coming out of the Muslim world in 2026. The best people can do, well, there was an Islamic golden age, don't you know? Like, really? Is that the conversation we're having? Sorry, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, so we've just got about 10 minutes left because we've kind of cut off at 4 o'clock, but we can go a bit past 4 o'clock. So Mandy wants to ask a question. Rob wants
Mandy.
to ask a question. Sorry, Claire. And can we do it quite quickly then? So we're going to have to make our points quite succinctly, if that's okay. So Mandy, first.
Thank you, Amir, for that talk. That was really fascinating.
Thank you, Mandy.
My question would be, please could you elaborate a little bit more about what has been happening in Poland and why they've decided to pull up the drawbridge and why they're not experiencing the suicidal empathy there? talking about earlier.
Yeah, Charles and I were in the break actually talking. So it was Charles, wasn't it? Yeah, talking about. I think there's two elements to it. One is political, that they obviously not opened the gates, the floodgates for mass immigration. They've actually resisted it. The second thing is more societal, in that they have not necessarily given, but they haven't taken away their citizens' right to be quite muscular in their opposition to an idea that is foreign to their society. Now, this has been sort of going around a little bit, the notion that we have lost ourselves. I think it was Gareth who mentioned this earlier, that we've lost faith in who we are. Poland somehow hasn't necessarily, and I believe Hungary under Orban, as despicable as I find Orban to be, on this particular point, haven't. They maintained a pride in this Western identity that we've lost. We've said, do you know what, that is outdated. Let's bring in the new form of society called multiculturalism, where not one culture is superior, but a plethora of cultures. And Poland have resisted that. And I think that's what's, in my uninformed, uneducated view, is what's led them to be protecting themselves against it.
Yeah, just a couple of things real quick. This goes to, I think, what you said, that we all have Muslim friends, and they're perfectly lovely, and they're nice people, but they are irrelevant. It goes to they are irrelevant, because when push comes to shove, they won't say anything, they'll agree with it, or they're afraid. They are irrelevant. It doesn't, that's very simple. This great country, I think, I've lived here 20 years now, this great country to me is sleepwalking into oblivion due to their suicidal empathy, due to British people being so lovely and so welcoming and so warm that you don't dare. These are, a lot of my friends are like this, and I put out little bits, just little bits, give ideas, and there's a big pushback. If you dare say anything, you can't criticize it. And I would never walk up to a Muslim woman wearing a thing, or a hijab, and say anything. That's chicken shit to do that. I would never do that. That's rude. My mom would skin me alive if she saw me do that. As much as I dislike Islam being here, but lovely British people are giving this country away, and it's the rich history is going to be gone, and there may be a war here. I don't think so. Because I don't think I think part of the reason is the lack of Christianity. When I hear people Brits say, this is a Christian country, I laugh in my head because this country has turned against religion. All of my British friends, if you say anything about religion, well, we're a Christian country, but they're not Christian, they're against religion. There is absolutely you have to admire Islam because they are committed, so many are committed. Where are the committed Christians that are going to save this country? They don't exist. They don't exist, and it's tragic. And I will say that I always said that I can go back to America. Many of y'all are stuck. However, that is no longer the case anymore. In the United States, in Texas, my beloved state, you think Texas would be the last place. Islam is making a hold there. If you don't believe me, look it up. They were trying to build a city, a Muslim city, and they got caught red-handed. But they are my Texas friends that agree with me see what's going on in Texas, what they've done in Wisconsin, with the aid of the Democratic Party, these white Democrats and black Democrats who are ushering it in. That is their mindset. So no place in the world is safe anymore. But the difference is in Texas, we have guns. And Texas people, Texas Christians, especially evangelicals, are fighting back. That will not happen in this country, and it's a shame. So I'll go back to fight, but I don't think I wish there was a war because a lot of people are going to die. And it may come to that. I don't think I'll live to see it. I may, but I hope I'm wrong. And
Yeah, no, Rob, I, to be honest, there's very little for me to add to that. I agree with practically everything you said. Yeah, let's just leave it there because I think you're right.
Claire?
Okay, yeah.
Hi, Claire.
I'll try and be quick. I've made a few notes here. So, great talk. Really enjoyed this enormously today. And all the funny moments too and all that. No, it isn't funny, the situation we're in, and I have to be in complete agreement. And I'm not incredibly well read on all this, but one thing I noticed, thank you for saying about Poland, that there's some kind of awakening in certain countries. But I have lived in UK for a long time, French friends, and they're quite political. A lot of people from France are political. And what they tell me is that they haven't got it quite as bad as the UK has, because they did invite people in from North African countries because of the colonialization. But when the Muslim thing started to get going, they said, if you want to go to our public schools, you're not wearing the gear. And I think that that's quite a bold move, but I think it's saying we have a lifestyle here. If you want the benefits of living here, you will be following our lifestyle. And it's not cruel or anything, it's just a thing, isn't it? But anyway, that's something that people could look into. But then the other point I want to make...
very briefly.
oh, sorry.
Bill,
No,
let's
no,
give
just to
Claire a
answer you,
chance.
just to answer you, to help answer the question. France is explicitly secular. As Rob says, we're a sort of pantomime Christian country.
Yes.
So
No, that's
in France, it's very easy. There are no religious symbols, full stop.
Yeah,
Of any
well,
kind.
and more pity us that we have to feel that we're clinging to a sinking ship of religion. But anyways, the other thing, so I wanted to ask you if that's what you meant by it's gone here, the horses got out of the stables, because once you say, we'll lay down for anything you want, sure, we'll make all the deals with you, Muslim peoples, because look at what you're doing, you've got so much power, you're everywhere in your big shiny cars and all that kind of thing. That's how I feel anyway. So if that's what you meant, I got that straight. But then coming back to, as the other Claire over here was saying, and the lady next to her, sorry because I'm new, about how inflamed we are about the girls that were raped, gang raped and all that kind of thing. And I remember, somebody can maybe fill in the blanks for me because I'm not too good on the facts here, but I remember hearing radio or whatever about the story there that I heard that the lid was blown in some of the northern outposts of Greater Manchester, or maybe it was Rotherham, Yorkshire, that the social workers who had long days anyway, they kept campaigning, and they were knocked back at least 3 times by the cops. You have no case, you have no case. And they knew, but because of keeping peace in the area with Muslims, you have no case. And then when the lid was blown on it, now of course there's a report comes out, and we know that it possibly went on lots more places in the United Kingdom. And it's just so criminal. It's what you're doing. You're taking, talk about the face of the prophet. You're taking the face of innocence in our country and putting SIGs out on it. Sorry, but I mean, that's really outrageous. And that's nothing about white, black, anything or else, is it?
No, you're absolutely right.
Okay, there was one more. Sorry,
No. It's just a quick comment on the France thing. I think France is very muscularly secular. That being said, trust me that they have enormous problems. I mean, there is an argument to say that, there is an argument to say that France is the one country in Europe, Belgium as well, that is either on equal footing or worse than Britain, because they have their problems that haven't seeped into on a political level, where in the UK we have a parliamentarian standing up and saying we should allow for cousin marriage, and we just shrug in the UK. I cannot believe that. Or we have Mohsin Ali, who's the deputy leader to the Green Party, who's an actual terrorist sympathizer. They don't necessarily have those type of problems in France, but on a grassroots level, they are in such trouble. France is gone. And I think Britain is gone as well. Belgium is gone. These are not countries that will ever be recognizable in 40 years' time. Kevin, hi.
Yeah, just a quick point on what's been said. When you said why aren't we rising up, part of the reason, as people pointed out, part of the reason is because the police, arrested fathers who tried to resist. The councils and the politicians, they were all complicit. The media, everyone has pushed back and pushed back. So it's cowardice and complicity of corrupted police forces, councils, etc. Anyway, that wasn't my question. My question was slightly more red pilling, hopefully. I listened to people like David Wood in the Apostate Prophet.
Yeah.
And they come out with a comment like Islam dies with the internet. I can't remember exactly what. But I mean, you said you're from Iran originally. I've heard, and be interested in your views, that as people are becoming, as information is becoming wider, that historically Islam was like small tribe, Bedouins, etc. But now information is more widely spread, and people are critiquing Islam. Some people are turning to Christianity or other religions, and I've also heard that in Iran a lot of mosques are closing simply because a large number of people are turning to apostates.
Yeah.
I mean,
funny you bring up David Wood. For those who may be unfamiliar, David Wood is this brilliant debater, if you wish, a Christian who debates Muslims. His area of expertise is around sort of debunking Muslims on a theological level, primarily. I've heard that argument from him, and it's not something that necessarily gives me hope, because the idea is that because information is becoming so readily available in around the world, that Muslims will be exposed to all of these debunking of Islam, and they won't turn to it. But that would assume that they are susceptible to evidence, which I don't necessarily see any evidence for. They're quite immune to evidence. With Iran, it's definitely true. I think around 80% of mosques have closed down since 2010. The interesting case with Iran is that there is a before Islam, so leading up to 1979, and there is an after Islam, and people have seen how even those like myself who was born after the revolution, the Islamic Revolution, have a living memory of a time of Iran's greatness, if you wish, and how Islam took that away from us. So we have that sort of thing that we can aspire to. Why that doesn't give me hope in the West is that if we look at purely statistical birth rates, for example, the average Muslim has 3 children in the West, whereas the average Brit has less than 2. So just statistically, and if we regard that most of these children will be born and indoctrinated within Islam, it's going to be a tipping point where the Muslims will be a majority. But I think they can do Islam, not Muslims, but Islam's can do a lot of harm without ever needing to be a majority in any case. So I don't necessarily find a lot of hope in that. Maybe an individual Muslim, there are cases that they convert out of Islam. That happens certainly, but not at a scale where this can be, we can put a lot of hope into it.
Okay, so that's after 4 now. Amir,
sorry.
I'm aware that you've given us your time, and also that it's getting really hot in here. I don't know
Yeah.
if it's sneezing the way through, but it's really warm in here. Does anyone have, could you take one more question?
Yeah,
I've
be
got a
more.
burning question. I think, Joan, you look like
I'll ask.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, so is everyone happy that they've had a chance to ask Amir? Everybody's here with us. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you.
And as I said earlier, please do check out Amir's writing. It's fantastic.